Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolon Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. We're the host of the Strictly Stalking podcast.
Strictly Stalking is a true crime podcast that explores stalking stories told by the survivors in their own words.
Join us every Tuesday as we interview survivors, advocates, and experts to give you a deep dive into the workings of a stalking case.
Would you know where to turn if you or someone you know is being stalked? We'll also give you the resources to fight back, know your rights, and get justice.
Find Strictly Stalking wherever you listen to podcasts from Podcast One.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, it's the case made famous by the true crime podcast Bone Valley. On February 24th, 1987, Michelle Schofield was murdered, and her husband Leo was convicted of the crime. But did he do it? And welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my imaginative co-host, Alice.
Hey, Brett. You know what? That was actually very kind. It looks like someone decided to be nice starting 2024, which I appreciate because I've just been speaking sweet nothings for like 35 minutes while you've figured out your equipment, which unfortunately for all our live folks, they had to listen to me rant. But for all you listening on podcasts, our wonderful editor has cut it all out.
Yes, that's the best part about listening to the podcast as opposed to listening or watching on YouTube. Jason takes care of it all. So thank you, Jason. You're the best. We love you. And Alice, it is a new year. Happy New Year to everyone. As we're recording this, it is the second day of January 2024. You know, Alice, when we started this podcast, we started talking about COVID. And when you know it, we sort of hope that maybe COVID would be gone in the future. And when you know it, I caught it over Christmas and was knocked out for like 2 weeks. Voice was gone. So if I'm a little scratchy, it's sort of left over from that. But I am feeling worlds better and happy to be back here recording with you and talking about what is, I think, an incredibly fascinating case with a lot of twists and turns, a lot of legal stuff to discuss, a trial, a murder, a man who claims he's innocent. Where have we heard that before? It's not the first time that we've covered an innocence case, but I'm excited about this one. And one of the reasons I'm excited about it is Bone Valley. If you guys have not listened to Bone Valley, we've mentioned it before. However you come out on this case, whatever you end up thinking about Leo Schofield and his guilt or innocence, Bone Valley is an incredible podcast. One of my favorite, maybe my favorite. I think it's supplanted Serial. Serial was sort of my favorite just because it was the first. But then you listen to Bone Valley, and it is so good. And you're going to enjoy it. And like I said, I think you'll enjoy it whether you agree with the eventual outcome or not. So we definitely recommend listening to that, either while you listen to us, before you listen to us, or after you listen to us. I know, Alice, you've mentioned it before. That's one you really enjoyed.
Yeah, I think during our Christmas wrap-up, year-end wrap-up, I said that was my favorite podcast of last year, even though I think I was a little late to coming to it, but it's definitely worth a listen. I think the producer, writer of that podcast, Gilbert King, did an incredible job. We'll talk a lot about kind of how you tell a story, even when you have a perspective that you're going in with, and how you go about it in kind of an intellectually honest way. And I think he does a really good job of it. And having met him at CrimeCon, he is just a lovely person as well, and a really, really good journalist. So great starting points for a podcast. So listen to them. I personally would say maybe listen to us, because we're not going to go, I think, nearly as deep dive as him, and he also has a lot of primary sources. He talks to people firsthand. We've told you before, we're not an investigative podcast, but we, read the primary sources. And so I would definitely say go listen either before or after this podcast.
And the reason I mentioned Serial is there's a lot of similarities there, both in that it is a innocence case. It's a case where the person who's accused is very involved in the podcast. You hear from them a lot. And so there's a lot of similarities between Serial and Bone Valley. I think you'll see that. So if you like Serial, you like Bone Valley. And I have a story to tell about Gilbert King, because I think it's an interesting one, and I think it says a lot about him. So we were in the middle of our Adnan Syed coverage. I think we had just done the episode about Jay. So it was like episode 8 or 9 or something. Who knows? I've forgotten what it is. And at the time, as we've often told you guys, the thing about a podcast is while you're recording an episode, you have to be researching for the future, because otherwise, when Adnan Syed ends, then what are we going to do? And we had sort of identified this case as a case we wanted to do and a case we wanted to spend a good amount of time on. And so we'd started researching it. I was listening to Bone Valley. I think Alice was listening to Bone Valley. Had gotten a hold of some of the trial transcripts, reading the trial transcripts. And then one day, right around that time, when in the middle of Adnan Syed's really getting hot and people are getting angry and everything else, Gilbert King follows me on Twitter. And I thought, well, that's serendipitous. We just so happened to be listening to his podcast. And so he followed us. And so I followed him. I thought, well, that's cool. Whatever. And then all of a sudden, he's instant messaging us. And he's talking about how much he's enjoying our coverage, that he's listened to Murdaugh and he's listened to Adnan Syed. And he really had hoped that we would cover Leo Schofield's case. And I thought to myself, that is unexpected, because we're in the middle. I mean, by that point, I think it had become pretty clear what we thought about the Adnan Syed case. And we're in the middle of doing this very controversial thing. And then all of a sudden, this person who's done a podcast, who is very much on the side of innocence, is coming to us and saying, I think it'd be great if you did this. And I think that says a couple things about Gilbert. Number one, he is very confident in Leo Schofield's innocence, because I think if he wasn't, I don't know that he would do that. And the other thing, he's very confident in his own reporting. I think he knows that whatever happens here, whatever conclusion we come to, people are going to be able to listen to Bone Valley too. And he's confident in what he said and the positions he's taken. And I think that's really commendable and a sign of the kind of journalist he is, that he would want us anywhere near this case. So I thought that was really interesting. And like Al said, we met him at CrimeCon. And not saying that we're necessarily going to come out the same way he did, or that we're going to come to the same conclusions on some of the evidence, but I have a lot of respect for him. And I wanted to share that little tidbit because I think it says a lot about him and how he goes about this whole project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, typically when you've done an entire podcast where you come out from the starting point, trying to see whether the allegations that this man who's in prison has been convicted after trial is in fact innocent, you typically probably don't want to reach out to prosecutors, and prosecutors who are in the middle of getting lambasted in the media, the social Twitter's world for coming out about how the trial showed that a man who was in prison was guilty as convicted. And here is the thing, when you listen to Bone Valley, he asks the hard questions, right? He asks the hard questions even if they go against his hypothesis or even his argument. And he asks all those questions and seeks answers to them. And he gives the answers even if they don't fully support whatever he is hypothesizing, which is honest journalism. And I appreciate that. And there is almost no slam dunk case in anything in life, right? And certainly not in the law, and certainly not in criminal cases. And so it would be suspect if you were getting a podcast where every argument was only going towards one side. And you don't get that from Bone Valley. He comes out with a very strong conclusion, but he doesn't leave out the other parts, which I find very, very full of integrity. So with all that said, a lot of you, I think, have not actually heard of Leo Schofield and Michelle Schofield. So I am excited is not the right word, but this is a very interesting case, and there's a lot to dive into. And there's a lot of strange twists and turns in this case. And I think that you guys will really be able to sink your teeth into all that there is to debate about and also think about. And I hope this sparks, what our listeners typically do, very thoughtful conversation, because there is a lot to discuss in this case.
Yeah, and let me go ahead and give you the background of the story for those of you who aren't familiar with it and those of you who haven't listened to Bone Valley. So we mentioned earlier, this is about the trial of Leo Schofield for the murder of his wife, Michelle. And when Michelle Somm met Leo Schofield, it was like fire meeting gunpowder, explosive. But the rock and roll bad boy from Massachusetts and the beautiful girl from Florida fell for each other hard, and soon they were married. That day, the day they said their I do's, was August 29th, 1986. By March of the next year, Michelle would be dead, murdered and dumped in a Florida swamp. At first, the police were stumped. But as stories of a volatile relationship and a witness who claimed to have seen some strange activity at the couple's trailer the night of the murder, suspicion began to fall on Leo. And it didn't help that Leo's own father had been the one who had found Michelle's body after receiving what he would describe as a message from God. And it certainly didn't help that witness after witness said Leo was violent and abused his wife. Or at least that's how the prosecution would tell it. The defense painted a different picture, one of a grieving husband, a thorough search, and witnesses who could not be trusted. But with a dead woman and no suspect other than her husband, it's probably not surprising that Leo was convicted. But did he do it? Or has an innocent man been sitting in prison for the last 35 years? And if Leo didn't kill Michelle, who did? So we're about to dive into the timeline of this case. And I think before we do, we should talk about that a little bit. This is a timeline-heavy case. In a lot of ways, the timeline, we always say they're important, but in a lot of ways in this case, it completely tells the tale. The problem is, unlike, say, the Adnan Syed case, and we're going to mention Adnan a lot just because there are some parallels. In the Adnan Syed case, at least you had the cell phone. Whatever you thought about the location data and whether it worked or not, at least you had some phone calls. You had some times that you could point to. You had some times of things that happened every day. You have the track coach testifying that track starts at 4 o'clock every day. So 4 o'clock is something you can point to, or like the time that the school starts, or the time that Hay had to pick up her little cousin. I mean, you had there were points that you could point to. This case is almost entirely witness based. Those of you who hate circumstantial cases and want direct evidence, well, this is your case, because everything is who do you believe and does their story hold up or not? And so what's essentially going to happen is we're going to tell you this, and I'm just going to warn you. This is going to be a very confusing timeline, because there comes a point where the stories start to sharply diverge. And we're going to tell you both sides of the story. We're going to tell you what various people are saying about what various people are doing at various times. And it's going to get confusing, but I think you have to look at it this way if you're going to have any idea what happened, because the timeline is absolutely critical. And the other thing we're going to do, we're going to split this timeline in half. Usually we do the whole timeline up to the present. But in this case, because of the way it works, I think the better way to do it is the timeline up to the trial. We'll do the trial, we'll do the evidence, we'll present all that to you, and then we'll pick up later on and continue with the timeline. So that's the way we're going to do this. Just wanted to give you a little heads up before we get started. This is obviously a case we're going to spend some episodes on, which is why we're in no rush, right? Like do it, and want to give you guys some sort of guidepost about how this is going to go. But we wanted to lay that out for you. If you've listened to Bone Valley, you understand what we're saying. If you haven't, trust me, we're going to try and walk you through this as best we can. People say we're repetitive sometimes. We're going to be repetitive in this because we want you to understand what all's going on. So that is my warning to you.
And you'll quickly see why there aren't, kind of external guideposts for time. It's because a lot of what's going to happen is in the middle of the night. And this is happening in the 80s with the main characters here, Leo and Michelle, who don't have a phone. And so this is, taking us back to a different point in time before we had cell phones, before we had tracking, before we had kind of time literally at our fingertips at every moment of the day. So with all that, let's dive right in. So there's Tuesday, February 24th, 1987 at 8:15 p.m. Michelle gets off work, and she worked as a waitress at Tom's restaurant. She and Leo, they were young. They didn't have a lot of money. They shared a trailer, with some friends. They were doing all they could. She's barely 18. She's barely an adult, really. And so she's working hard to make money for their life together. And so she works there and is getting off that night. And it had been a relatively good night for her. She collected $13 and change in tips. And for her, and at this time, that was a great night of tips. And she was excited about this because every dollar counted for her and Leo. And we know she gets off around this time because the manager of Tom's actually watches her walk over to the Exxon gas station called Sparky's, which is across the street. And she's reported to be wearing a white shirt and red slacks, as well as slip-on shoes. And the reason Michelle went across the street to Sparky's is that she needed some gas for the car that she shared with Leo. She got specifically $3 in gas, and she bought a Coke. And she asked the store clerk if there was a payphone. And that, again, is because they had no cell phones. And in fact, they didn't even have a phone in the trailer that they shared.
Yeah, I mean, this is really a throwback in a lot of ways. It's a throwback to when everything was a lot cheaper and in many ways simpler. So, yeah. There are no cell phones because cell phones have not been invented at this point. We're all the way back in 1987. And as Alice said, they don't have a lot of money to the point they don't have a phone in their trailer at all. And so they're doing, sort of reminds me of being in high school and having to stop at the payphone and call my parents if I wanted to stay out like an hour longer or whatever. And that's what she's doing. Leo has a job. He works at a factory. We're going to talk about some. It becomes sort of important. But mainly, he is in a rock and roll band. He is a rock and roll guy, as we said earlier. He's from Massachusetts. When you listen to Bone Valley, he's got this great Boston, Massachusetts accent, and he's a sort of rock and roll bad boy from up north, down in Florida, where he's met Michelle, and they've gotten married, and they're trying to make ends meet. He's trying to make the band go while also making enough money to keep everything going. So one thing to note, and it's important to note, she asks about the phone, but she doesn't actually use it at this point. So this is 8:15. She's off work, stopped by the gas station, asked about the phone. This is one of those data points we can feel pretty secure is exactly what happened.
Yeah. And so around this time, she's getting off work, asks about the phone, doesn't use it. And what about Leo? So around 8:30 to 8:45, we know that Leo is over at Buddy Anderson's house because he's there practicing with his band. And because, as I mentioned previously, Leo and Michelle, they have to share one car. Michelle is the one who has it because she had to get to work that day. And so Leo is waiting for Michelle to come get him after practice. Now, we know that even though Leo didn't have a car, Buddy's dad, Jim, had brought Leo to the house. So that's how he got there. Now, Jim Anderson's wife, Anita, would testify that Leo was upset that Michelle was running late and he was kind of pacing around being like, where is she? Why hasn't she picked me up yet? Because Leo was expecting her at 8:30. And that would kind of track with the fact that she got off work at 8:15. And I guess the idea was she gets off work, is supposed to come pick him up, which is why Anita remembered around the 8:30, 8:45 time frame because Michelle hadn't come get him yet. Leo was saying things like, where is she? She's late. Why am I still here?
And apparently this was a pretty common occurrence for them that because she had the car, Leo ended up waiting around on her a lot. And it was sort of a sore subject because he at least wanted her to give him a call if she was going to be late. Now, remember, she asked about the payphone, but she didn't actually use it. So Leah's sort of waiting around for her to show up. She's not showing up. And he's starting to get a little irritated because it seems like the same thing that has happened before is now happening again.
Yeah, that's a great point. We now know of this night as the night that everything happens. And it is now what we are talking about. But at the time that it's happening, this is kind of a regular occurrence, right? They had a really hot and steamy relationship. You heard that it was like incredible sparks, but on the other end, they also had pretty explosive fights. And one of these fights was this kind of, Michelle, why are you late getting me? And when we hear, testimony from other witnesses and also Leo's own testimony, he talks about how this is just a common occurrence and nothing is out of the ordinary, even this night when she's late, because she's always late. This is just one of the many other times that she's late picking him up. Now, the next data point we do have is that at 9 o'clock, Sparky's closes. From that point forward, there would be no witnesses of anything that happened at Sparky's. And as we go through the timeline, you'll see that Sparky's plays a pretty big role here. And it is problematic that it's closed, so we don't have any witnesses and we have to go off on hearsay.
And one thing we like to do is sort of guide you if you're wanting to look into this case yourself. Because we always talk about, you guys should read this stuff. We're going to put the transcript of the trial up on the website so you can read it. One reason this is important is if you do read it, you'll notice the prosecution does a few things that maybe, might be considered misleading. So at times, look, this is a murder case, right? And Leo's obviously saying, I didn't do it. Somebody else did it. And so one of the questions is, what are the various places where something could happen? And one place is Sparky's. Could someone have gotten her there? Could someone have attacked her there? The prosecution will put on witnesses who will talk about the fact that they saw her, she came over, she bought the gas, and they'll say things like there was nobody around her. There was no one, she didn't interact with anybody. Well, that's all well and good, but that only does us for 8:15. After 9, now all of a sudden, there are no witnesses. Why is that important? Because what is something we know happened? She asked about a phone, and there is going to be a phone call, but it's going to happen after Sparky's is closed. So if you happen to be reading the trial and you see that discussion by the prosecution, a flag should go up that they're, it's a trial. These things happen, right? It's not like the questions are not misleading. It is true that the first time she went to Sparky's, there was nobody there. There was no one she interacted with. There was no obvious person stalking her. But that doesn't mean there wasn't someone later on. Just something to consider. So that takes us to 9 o'clock. So from 9 to 10 p.m., Alice Scott, who is a neighbor of Leo and Michelle, who will become a critical witness in this entire case and whose credibility is absolutely paramount. If she is credible, then Leo Schofield has a lot of problems. If she's not credible, then maybe he doesn't have as many. She's sort of the Jay Wilds of this case. If you want to think of the comparison of a critical witness, well, she is one. So we're going to talk about her a lot, but she will tell police that she saw a blue truck with a white camper around 9 to 10 o'clock. Now, this truck matches Leo's father's truck. Now, what's interesting is by the time we go to trial, this sighting has dropped away. She no longer talks about seeing this truck. She doesn't testify about this truck. And the reason for that is probably that the sighting is hard to reconcile with anything else that's going on that night and anything else that she's going to say. So just another interesting data point of the evolving timeline that we're going to talk about. And this is what we were saying earlier. There are real difficulties in this case because you have people who are, as we've said before, weeks later, trying to give times of when they saw things. If, for instance, this sighting had been at 1 o'clock in the morning, it would be much more significant because it's at 9 o'clock. It doesn't really fit with anybody's theory of what happened. And you're going to see that again and again. People who are trying to estimate the times that things happened. we're going to give you those, but just know, and I think it's important to know, as you try and construct a timeline in your own mind, just because someone says it happened at X, it doesn't mean you have to take that as gospel. You have to look at what they say, compare it to what other people are saying, and try to make something sensible in your own mind.
That's a really good point. And some people say, how could people's times be so off? When we're talking about, basically, this is just from our experience in speaking with witnesses, basically the darkness hours, people don't know if it's 8 p.m. If it's wintertime, 8 p.m. is completely pitch black already, 8 p.m. or 3 a.m. They may sound like vastly different times to you, but we talk to witnesses all the time who are like, it was dark and it seemed really late. I don't know about you, but especially with the time change, this is February, so it's winter. The days are shorter. They're getting longer, but February is still a pretty short day. 8 o'clock, if you didn't have a concept of what time it was, and if you're trying to remember later on what time it is, you can see how 8 o'clock, even though it's relatively early in the night, a time that maybe some people are even just eating dinner, just getting home, can seem like much later in the night. And you can all of a sudden think it's a 9, 10, maybe even after midnight, when in fact it's much earlier. All to say is, when we speak to witnesses, they kind of are able to say, okay, it was light, it was dark, it was cold, it was hot. But beyond that, and by the way, they get those two things mixed up all the time, whether it was light or dark anyways. And the reason is your brain fills in things. Alice Scott, in this instance, she's seeing something she sees every day from her vantage point. She's in her home. It's not like she's visiting a museum she doesn't normally go to. She's sitting in her probably chair, looking out the window she looks out every day. So her brain, at the very least, can remember what all these scenes look like, both in daylight and in nighttime. I have no idea what she actually saw, but that's something to keep in mind of what the witness's vantage point is. And in this instance, she is seeing something in terms of a scene, not the truck, but out the vantage point that she sees every single day. So it's something that's kind of burned in her brain, that she is able to probably recall a scene from that vantage point in every season, in every hour of the day, because she's so familiar with it, which actually makes witness testimony about something specific more difficult because she has so many memories of that vantage point.
And these are all people who stay up late. So for me, if I'm telling you what happened at night, it probably didn't happen after about 10 because I'm asleep by then, usually, unless we're recording episodes. But I mean, these people are up all night, and you've all experienced this. You go out to a party or you're hanging out with friends. You look at your watch, it's 9 o'clock. You look at your watch again 30 minutes later, and it's midnight. And you're like, where in the world did all that time go? You've all experienced that. And, if you hadn't looked at your watch that second time and something happened and later on someone asked you, what time was it when this thing happened? You would do your best to guess. You would know it's sometimes after 9, probably not midnight, because there's no way it was that late, because you don't realize how much time has passed. And if you don't have some sort of anchor, the other problem is days. As we've said before, usually if most days go by and nothing happens and you would never remember them, and then there are some days where they're the most important days of your life and you remember them forever, right? But it can be difficult when someone, goes missing, they end up murdered, the police show up a week later, they're asking you questions, you're trying to remember what day it happened, what time. You can understand why this is so shaky. And, I feel like to a certain extent, we're preaching to the choir. I think you guys all know this, but I just see so often with timelines in particular, people grab onto times and they want to believe, really, usually it's whatever benefits, whatever view they have. So if it helps them, then, well, that person is, a time savant. They know exactly when everything happens. And if they're not, well, then who knows? It could be any time. And so we just want to make clear for you guys, we're giving you times. This is just what these people say. How accurate it is, who knows? Now, one time we do know for sure, and this is, it's nice to have some anchors, is what happens at 9:45. So at 9:45, Michelle calls Buddy Anderson, which is the person where he's at his house. Leo answers. And according to Leo, and this is what he'll tell everybody who's there when this happens, she tells him that she's gone home, she's cleaned the house and fed the dog. She tells him that she made $13 in tips because she's very excited about this because that was a lot of money for them, and that she's bought $3 worth of gas. And we know, as we said before, Leo and Michelle do not have a phone. So the presumption, and we don't know this for certain. I guess there were no phone records at the time, or maybe it wasn't able to be nailed down. But the presumption is she has driven back to that gas station, the one that she asked the person, do you have a payphone? And she is using that payphone to call Buddy Anderson. And she tells Leo that she's going to get something to eat and then she'll come get him. Leo tells her, why don't you go ahead, come and get me. He's going to go to his friend Vince Rayner's house. So he basically says, I'm going to walk to Vince's house, come pick me up there, and we'll go to McDonald's together. We'll have something to eat, and we'll both get to eat. She says, that sounds great. And she tells him, I will come get you right now. This is at 9:45. The day after she disappears, Leo will also relay this story to a police officer who came to take his statement. So both at the time it happened and the next day, this is Leo's story of how this phone conversation went at 9:45 p.m.
So this is really interesting, right? You know, we only know this because Leo turns around and tells everyone in the house, but that's pretty good because there are people who are overhearing this conversation and then he relays it kind of at the time before anything bad happens. It's not part of a witness statement. It's not part of a police report. He turns around and tells the other people in the room this conversation. Some things here just don't jive with me. I mean, we know that Michelle asked about the phone at 8:15. And for those of you, if we haven't been clear or you are like totally born in the aughts and don't understand, when we say Michelle and Leo don't have a phone in their trailer, we mean like a phone, like a corded phone attached to, you know, the ground and has a landline. They don't have a cell phone. They don't have a phone. They don't have any way of really communication at their trailer. And so the fact that she's calling at 9:45 is kind of strange when she clearly had in her mind that she wanted to call him at some point. And if she knew at 8:15 she was going to go home already, that was going to put her off the timeline of picking him up at 8:30. So even if she gets home and like many of us, oh, now I need to feed the dog. Oh gosh, the dishes are disgusting. I should wash it. Even if you didn't plan to clean up the house and it ended up being an hour and a half later, I can imagine that time gets away from you once you get home. But the fact that she was going to drive home at 8:15 itself would already put her off the timeline of picking him up. And she had in mind that she was going to call him. So I just, I don't think necessarily go into why she's late, but because the timeline matters here, it's something interesting to note. And we don't have an answer to this because the only one who can answer that question is Michelle. Except that I do know the two kind of times we have that have external validators, 8:15 and 9:45, don't really make sense in the timeline to me.
And it's interesting, and I thought about this too, when it was going through. I actually had to reread some testimony because I got confused. Because it didn't make sense to me that she didn't call him at 8:15. Like, I didn't really understand why she asked about the phone, but then didn't call him. And I initially thought that she did call him, and then went and did these other things, and then called him again. But that's not right. According to the testimony, according to everybody, she didn't call him until this time. Leo was getting angry that he's not hearing from her. The one thing I'll say about it is it's kind of consistent with her. It seems like she does this stuff. She's supposed to get him. She's supposed to call him. She kind of decides to do. And they had a puppy, and I think the puppy was not really that housebroken or anything. So maybe she just thought, I need to make sure the dog's okay. And I'll just, and they didn't have a lot of money, so maybe she didn't want to waste the quarter on that first call. She just thought, I'll call him afterwards.
And that's a great point. Like, there's a completely reasonable, maybe not rational now looking back, but like you can imagine, I don't want to use a quarter. It's 8:15. Yeah, I'm going to be like 15 minutes late getting him, but it's just 15 minutes. It's not a big deal. I'm going to run home, let the dog out because he's peeing and pooing all over our trailer, which we do know that to be the case, that the dog had accidents in the trailer. It'll take me 2 minutes, and people who are running late, like myself, always underestimate how long it's going to take to do things. So maybe in her mind, she's like, 15 minutes being late is actually within my realm. It's pretty good for me in picking him up. So why waste a quarter? He's just going to yell at me for 5 minutes. Why don't I just go ahead and let the dog out, save us both some, steam cleaning of the carpet tonight because there's no, doo-doo on the carpet, and then I'll go get him. But instead, she kind of got sidetracked, cleaned the house, and then she realized, I haven't eaten yet. I'm really hungry, but it is pretty late now, so let me call him, grab food, and then go pick him up. So that absolutely could be what happened, and there's nothing nefarious about it. But again, because we have so few touch points of what times are, I think it's worth noting that she didn't call him at 8:15.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And it's as we discuss this case more and you start thinking about theories about what happened, did Leo do it? Did he not do it? Did somebody else do it? Her sort of, and this is touched on a little bit in Bone Valley, and it's touched on a little bit in the testimony, but it's never really gone into. Michelle has a little bit of a wilder lifestyle. She's staying out late. She's hanging out with her friends. She's not always home when Leo wants her to be home.
And remember, guys, she's 18.
Exactly. She's 18 and, she's newly married, but she's still wanting to sort of be alive. Like there's one point where her brother is actually talking on Bone Valley and talking about this. He's like, look, she's young. She wants to, why are you so upset that she hadn't come home yet? She should be able to hang out with her friends. The problem with that is there are probably a lot of people who we don't really know about who may or may not have had some sort of involvement with her that could be potential suspects who were never followed up on because I don't know that anybody necessarily knew who they were. That's complete speculation, but there are going to be time gaps, more time gaps like this as we go through where it's entirely unclear where she was and what she was doing. And was she with somebody else or was something else going on? And Alice has put her finger on this sort of unknowable thing about what exactly happened between 8:15 when she gets off work and when she makes this call. All we have is what she told Leo. And as we get into this and we get back to the trailer, there are things about the trailer that make you think this probably is what happened, that she probably did go back and she probably did do some of these things. And we'll talk about them as we get to them. But once again, why she didn't call him initially, I don't know. Could be a lot of things. Could be significant. Could be completely insignificant.
And again, the reason it could be significant is something happened to her. And every tidbit of where she could have met with some nefarious actor is relevant here. So there are just pockets of time we know nothing about that could lead to vulnerability later.
Exactly. So as we've said before, this is around 9:45 when Leo takes his call. There's a whole bunch of people who are home at this point. Buddy Anderson, his dad's there, his mom's there, I think a couple members of the band. So this is one where we feel pretty confident this is about when this happened. Another reason we know that is because Buddy and Leo at this point actually leave to go to Vince's house. Vince says they got there around 10 o'clock. And the expectation is Michelle will arrive any moment.
So at 11:20 or 11:30 p.m., they've been at Vince's house for about an hour and a half at this point, and Michelle still hasn't come. And Leo is mad, but also he's getting kind of worried now. So he calls his dad's house, and his stepmom answers. And Leo tells her just that. He's worried about Michelle. She's flaky, but this is really flaky. She had just called. She was supposed to be there in 10, 15 minutes. And here we are an hour and a half after that call where Michelle was supposed to leave and come directly to Vince's house, but she's nowhere to be found. So his dad actually tells Leo, don't worry about it. She'll probably show up. But if she doesn't, call back. And you can imagine he says that because it's late at night, right? It's 11:30. Most people are in bed. Let's not worry about this unless there's something to worry about. We know that this is kind of something Michelle does in the past. So before you drag us all out of bed, let's see if she actually shows up. Maybe she's just 10 minutes away. She got sidetracked. She got sidetracked earlier. She was supposed to come pick you up at 8:30 and then didn't call till 9:45. So this is kind of within kind of those time frames of the way she operates. And we know this call happened because Leo's sister, Kristen, who's at home with Leo's dad, will testify to this call at trial. She overhears it. And Kristen remembered looking at the microwave clock and seeing the time because she's asked about it at trial. How do you know what the time is? And many of you have said this before, that you regularly look at your clock so that if ever in the future you're asked to testify, you'll know the time. By the way, that never works for me because I immediately forget the time. But Kristen noted this call because it's kind of in the middle of the night and Leo is upset. And so she does look at the microwave clock and notes the time. At 11:45, Leo calls his dad back. So he had hung up, taken his advice, see if Michelle would show up. She did not. And now Leo is calling the house again. And his dad says, okay, I'll come get you. And 15 minutes later, Leo's dad shows up and picks up Leo. And this call is also confirmed by Leo's sister, Kristen, who kind of was up from 15 minutes earlier, saw all this happening, thought enough about the call to note that first call's time. And so when Leo calls back, sees her dad leave, she again notes the time. And again, this is all testified to at trial.
And it's not only testified to, but I think one thing that's important, all of these people's credibility is going to come into question later on. The prosecution is going to really try and undermine both Leo's father and his sister and his mother because they provide important alibis. However, the prosecution's theory is that at this time, Michelle is absolutely alive. Their theory is she is alive, and everything that's happening now is basically undisputed. Now, as we've said before, just because it's the prosecution's theory doesn't necessarily mean it's true. The difference is, in this case, it is impossible for Leo to have murdered Michelle at this point. He is literally at Buddy Anderson's house this entire time. So if she's dead, he didn't kill her. So going forward on the premise, and we'll stick with this premise until something disproves it. I mean, the man was convicted after all. Going on the premise that he did this, he had not done it yet, and nobody disagrees with this. Now, I think that's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, because no reason to start trying to tear down the timeline yet, because it feels like this is pretty secure. But the second thing, and you see how the prosecution, they do this in the trial, and it's pretty effective. They're trying to present Leo as manufacturing an alibi as this night goes on, trying to sort of establish an alibi for himself so that he couldn't have killed Michelle. And part of that is faking how concerned he is about her, faking that he's really worried about her. And they, have people say it was weird that he was so concerned about her. Why was he so concerned about her? Like I said, her brother will talk about that. Like, why were you so concerned about her? The fact of the matter is he was concerned about her at this point, at a point where we know that, at least according to the prosecution theory, she's not dead yet and he hadn't killed her yet. So it is certainly the case, Leo was actually worried about her. Now, whether that worry eventually turns into murderous rage, we'll talk about later, but it's another sort of, I just think I enjoy sort of seeing how prosecutors and defense attorneys build their case. And it was just interesting to see the prosecution do this because it was pretty effective. And Leo's defense attorney, I don't think he was as bad as he's made out to be in Bone Valley, because like every innocence case, the defense attorney is always presented as a complete buffoon who doesn't know what he's doing. But he did not do a very good job of refuting this, I thought. But if you actually look at the timeline, it's pretty clear that Leo is evidencing this concern at a very early period of time. He just has a feeling that something is wrong.
If he is the one who killed her, he is exhibiting concern before having killed her. And this concern, I think is worth noting, is witnessed by multiple people, not just his family members, who some people don't trust, because you think that you'll lie for your family members. We have his band members' parents. So there's a lot to tear down about the timeline and what we know about the timeline, but I think it would be a bit of a waste of time to do so up until now because there's more to come. So now the clock is ticking towards midnight. So technically we're now into Wednesday, February 25th, 1987. At midnight, remember, Leo's dad came to pick him up, and Leo and his dad now drive around looking for Michelle or the car, because they have the one car, and she had been in it and was going to be in the car to pick up Leo. But after driving around for half an hour and going back to Michelle and Leo's trailer, they still don't find Michelle, so Leo goes back to Vince's. And part of this is maybe that's where they were supposed to meet up. That's where Michelle was supposed to get him. So they don't have phones. Going back to Vince's to see if maybe Michelle got caught up, got a flat tire. For whatever reason, we'll talk about it later. She shows up where they were supposed to meet. But at 12:43, Leo shows up at Vince's and he tells him he's worried because Michelle is not there. She's nowhere to be found. And at this point, Leo doesn't just call family members, doesn't keep looking. He actually calls the sheriff's office to let them know that his wife is missing. this is very interesting because he is calling relatively soon. So he's been accounted for in terms of where he is. He's been at Buddy's house. He's been at Vince's house. And he's with his dad for about 40 minutes or so before he's convinced he can't find her. And in those 40 minutes, he then calls the sheriff's office. He doesn't delay. Those of you who have listened to us cover missing person cases know that a lot of police stations won't even take your request seriously if it hasn't been 24 hours, sometimes longer than that, of not hearing from someone. He heard from her just at 9:45, 10:45, 11:45, 12:45. So she hasn't been heard from in just 3 hours, and he calls the sheriff's office. And this call is recorded, and we have that recording, and it catches Leo telling Vince that he doubts that Michelle is screwing around, but if she is, God help her. And Leo mentions that the slightest little thing sets him off, but he also says this is not like Michelle to be this late and to be this unaccounted for. Now, the sheriff's office takes the call. Again, it's the middle of the night, so you probably, you have low staff members there. And they do check the jails to see if Michelle is locked up somewhere. Maybe she caught, some ticket or drunk driving. Who knows? Maybe she is actually in the slammer, and that's why she hasn't been able to call Leo. But unfortunately, they do not have Michelle in their custody. So at this point, after having checked the jails, knowing that she's not in there, Leo swears out a missing persons report. Again, 3 hours since he last spoke to her.
And there's a couple things that are interesting about this. Number one, you can hear this. This was played at trial. You can hear it on Bone Valley. What's interesting about Leo's conversation with Vince is, he doesn't know he's being recorded, or he may know he's being recorded in some recess of his mind, but he's just talking to Vince while he's on hold. But while he's on hold, it's actually still recording. So you hear this sort of candid conversation between him and Vince. And he sounds sort of like the way parents are, when something happens with their kids, you're initially very worried, and then when you realize they're fine, then you're really mad. And he kind of feels like that's where he's teetering. He's like really worried about her, but he knows if she pulls in that driveway, and is like, I just decided to go to McDonald's by myself or something like that, he is going to be angry. He knows that, and you can sort of hear that in his voice and the way he describes it. And it's interesting and very candid. And
in some ways, I think I've been in that position where it's like, I really want to be proved wrong, and I really want to be pissed off, because then that means everything's okay, right? You can hear it for yourself, the recording, but there's kind of that so God help her sort of thing. It's like, but I really do hope that it's the latter, because it means she's fine, because I really don't like where I am right now, which is really worried about her. And you can imagine that even the way he's talking, you can tell when he's talking on the phone to the police, and you can tell when he's talking to Vince. You all have different voices when you're talking to someone official versus when you don't know that anyone's overhearing you. The candidness in your voice, the relaxedness, the familiarity with speaking to someone. So he could be a very good actor and know that he's being recorded on hold. Or you can kind of tell that he is speaking in a manner that it's truly what he's saying to his friend, as opposed to what he wants to craft for an alibi.
And one reason it made a lot of sense to check the jails is because Michelle doesn't have a driver's license. She doesn't have insurance. So she really should not be driving the car. She had sort of talked herself out of getting in trouble because of that before, but he can certainly imagine a situation in which, a cop who's having a bad night pulls her over and decides, I'm going to take you to the jail for the night or something. So, he's calling around these places that he thinks she could be. So it's not unusual that he would try there. Particularly, he's sort of in a desperate state. He can't find her, so maybe she's with the police.
And so he makes this call from Vince's house, and he's at Vince's house for about half an hour, because at 1:15 a.m., Leo leaves Vince's house with his dad. Now, up until this point, really no one disputes the timeline. But from 1:15 on, it gets really complicated. According to Leo, his dad and his stepmom, at this point, around 1:15, Leo's dad takes him back to his dad's house because Leo Sr. is coming down with the flu. He wants to be in bed. He doesn't feel great right now. He's been feeling sick the entire time that he's driven around with Leo for the last hour and a half. So he goes back home, lays down, and Leo and his stepmom now leave the house to go look for Michelle. They do not find her. And Leo's sister, remember Kristen, she'll testify that her father returned 45 minutes to an hour after he left to help Leo look for Michelle. So that kind of comports with the timeline that we have so far. And she will also testify that Leo was with his father when Leo Sr. came home. So again, what we have so far, that they left. We think that they drove around, went to Vince's house, called the police station, swore out the missing person report, and they both came back at the same time. This is relevant again because Leo Schofield Jr. doesn't have a car. Remember, Michelle has the car, so he's dependent on his dad to drive around. And what we have Kristen saying is that they left together, came back together. Leo's dad went to go get Leo, and then they both came back to Leo Sr.'s house. Kristen will also testify that when they came back around 1 a.m., her father goes to bed, and then her mom and Leo left. Now, Kristen will testify that they had a gong clock in the trailer, and it would gong at the half hour, and that's why she knows the time so well, because she remembered it gonging around when Leo and his mother left, indicating it was 1:30 in the morning, and Leo's mom will testify to the same timing. So if this testimony is true, Leo's almost certainly innocent, because as his mom would later say, he can't be at two places at once.
And Leo is going to run into the classic problem that we've talked about before. Up until this point, he has a great alibi because he's with all sorts of people, including people who are going to testify to some pretty bad things about him later on. So they have a pretty good amount of credibility. But at this point, he's with family. And his alibi depends on his family. And family alibi witnesses are the worst, because it's very easy for a jury to say, well, I've got this evidence of your guilt over here, and I got your mom saying you didn't do it. What am I going to do, right? How am I going to decide? Now, we're going to talk about Kristen and her testimony in more depth later on, but as you can see, she has these things that she can point to about why she remembers certain things happening. You know, she looked at the clock on the microwave, the gong clock. I don't know how many of y'all had a grandfather clock in your house. Seems like in the 80s, everybody had a grandfather clock. I don't know if anybody has grandfather clocks anymore. I'd like a grandfather. I liked grandfather clocks.
So I had a grandfather clock for like a month while I was holding it for a family member who was moving. My kids broke the glass panes in them. So maybe that's why people don't have grandfather clocks anymore, because kids have gotten crazier.
Man, and people are asking how you sleep. I remember growing up, that clock.
I asked that.
All night long.
How can you sleep with that?
Dong, dong. Yeah. I remember it like, I mean, it just becomes part of your life, right? You just sleep through it. Well, look, I think we're at an inflection point in the case. This is probably a pretty good place to break on our first part. Sorry we spent a lot of time sort of in the beginning extemporizing, but I think it's good to sort of lay out why we're going to do what we're going to do, particularly if some of you are new and you haven't walked through some of these cases with us before. But at this point, this is where everything really becomes complicated. It's around this time that the prosecution will posit that Leo kills Michelle. And the reason they will do that is because, as we're going to talk about next week, they have some really powerful witnesses who are going to testify, eyewitnesses who are going to testify to seeing things happen at certain points in time that, according to them, indicate that Leo is the murderer. At the same time that that's going on, you have Leo's going to be doing some other things. What's interesting, if Leo is creating an alibi, he's really good at it, because as you're going to see, this is a relatively small area. We're going to put up a map at some point. Relatively small area. But if he's murdering Michelle, he's doing it, he's really got this alibi thing down. And you're going to see that because Leo runs into a lot of people this night. A lot of just random people, including police officers at various times. So you're going to see how the timelines come together, and this really is going to turn into a who do you believe? Do you believe Leo and his family, or do you believe some of these eyewitnesses and what they saw? Now, these eyewitnesses are going to become much more credible because of things the prosecution is going to reveal about Leo and Michelle's relationship. And we're going to go into a lot of detail on that too. It's very controversial. I think it's worth discussing how much weight it should have, and we're going to do that. There is so much in this case. This case has a ton of twists and turns. On its own, the trial is fascinating. But once you get to the things that started happening after the trial, man, that's when it becomes a complete roller coaster. So you guys, you got a lot to look forward to. You're going to love this case. And like I said, after you listen to us, you're going to listen to Bone Valley, and you're going to love it even more. Well, Alice, it's been so long since I've talked to you. I've been sick and unable to talk to you. I've missed you so much. And in the interim, we've built up a bunch of questions. So do you want to answer some questions for the people? Okay, let's do it.
I just think, who wants to hear the answers to these questions from us? But it's been a really fun edition. I think that people enjoy, that we're not just lawyer robots.
I love the questions. I know, it's a lot of fun. I think the questions are awesome. And, all you got to do is leave a 5-star review, right, and you get to ask whatever you want.
On this podcast or the other podcast, Legal Briefs.
That's right. Okay, let's see. If I asked you, I don't know if I've asked you this question, but I'm going to ask it to you anyways. If I asked you that if you were stranded on a desert island with one book, what book would you choose?
We did the song. Did we do book? Yeah, I think we did do book. We did the
song. That's right. I don't know that we did book.
But
well, that's just Deb's, not Debbie. She wants to know, if you had one book, what book would you choose?
Well, I don't think we've done book. I think we've done song. Okay, you can go first if you'd like. Yeah, you're right. We did song. We did song. Let's do it.
I don't know. I mean, I guess the righteous thing to do is to say the Bible.
Didn't I say that already? Maybe we have answered this question. Let's take the Bible out.
Maybe the
Bible out.
Okay, so taking the Bible out.
And then let's answer the question. I think I know what mine is, which is not going to be hard.
I love The Great Gatsby, but it's so short. I feel like I need a really long book. I need the Lord of the Rings trilogy, so that I'll have a ton to read if I'm going to be stranded on a desert island. That's what I'm going to say. Lord of the Rings.
People in the chat, I think, probably already have guessed what I'm going to say, which is not going to be a surprise, but I'm going to add a twist to it because it's going to be Little Women, but it's not going to be the first edition, because did you know the first edition is only the first half of, I guess, the movie or the book now is when they're children. The second edition is once they grow up and then, something very terrible happens to Beth. I'm really sorry if I just ruined it for all of you. But those two actually became one book because first one, Little Women original, was just when they're children. And then there was the second edition. And then many years later, they 50 or 100 years later, they combined it all into one book. So now we know Little Women as both. So I would not take the first edition of Little Women because I'd want both halves of the story. And it's a really long book. And it kind of goes through from the, simpler times of childhood all the way through all the emotions and, roller coasters of life into the end. And the reason I don't say Harry Potter, even though I showed up to every midnight release of every book and have all of the Harry Potters and cannot wait until I can reread them with my children, is because that's not one book. That's 7 books and potentially more if you look at all the additional books that have come since then. And I can't pick just one book. I would need the entire series, and that would be cheating to take 7 books instead of 1. So that's why I go with Little Women, which is a little bit cheating, except the editors have cheated for me and combined it into one book.
That's the advantage of Lord of the Rings.
It really is one book all along.
Yeah. So,
it's so true.
It really was. Yeah. It's just so funny when people watch the movie, the first movie, and they were confused about why it ended where it did. They're like,
that's right.
No, they don't actually take the ring all the way.
Right.
In the beginning, you're going to have to wait. Okay, so that's one. Let's do one more.
Good question. Thanks, Debs.
And the reason we're going to do one more is because this person asked a 6-part question. So this is Chaos Coordinator. Up there.
Sounds like a parent.
Well named because they have 6 pages. And so, do you want me to ask you all the questions at once?
No, one at a time. I can't hold that much in my old brain.
First ever concert.
Oh, my first ever? Matt Wirtz. Mm-hmm. When I was 16 or 17 years old, and you've probably never heard of him. He was like an indie-ish guy in Austin, and my 3 girlfriends and I, we straight and narrow. We'd never done anything. And he's not I think he might even be a religious artist in another life, but he's mainstream. And we were at the front and we made shirts that were we love you, Matt Wirtz. And, had bracelets made and we were screaming. And I remember during the concert, we were so excited to be there. And we looked like we were 12. And I remember at one point in the concert, he was like, really glad I have the, like, all the elementary students out to see me or something like that. And I remember being like, who is he talking about? Now that I look back as a 30-something-year-old, I was like, oh, he probably was like, I dreamed of this rock and roll lifestyle. And here I have these like 12-year-olds who are like screaming their faces off at the foot of the stage. Thanks, Matt Wirtz. That was my first concert. It was fantastic.
See, now he's probably listening to the podcast. He's like, oh, that's so awesome.
I don't know if he still makes music. I'm curious.
My first concert ever was the band Alabama.
Oh.
But I was with my parents.
Nice.
I don't know if that counts.
Yeah, it counts.
It was great. Awesome.
That's all. Your parents had good.
The first one it was so great. And if you guys ever seen, got a lot of great songs. Country music band, for those of you who don't know. The first one I went to see with my friends, and this is probably going to be surprising. You know, I grew up in the 90s. So imagine all the various bands that we could have gone to see. Bob Dylan.
Huh?
Bob Dylan. And the thing that I remember, the funny moment that I remember the best about the Bob Dylan concert was the Brian Setzer Orchestra opened for him. The Brian Setzer Orchestra had like one song, Jump, Jive, and Wail. It was their big song.
Uh-huh.
This is back. This is like when swing came back briefly. And I remember he's doing the opening concert and he's like, what do you guys want to hear? And so, of course, everyone yells,
of course,
Jump, Jive, and Wail, right? And he goes, did I hear Straight Cat Strut? And everybody yelled back, no. And then he played it anyway.
He's like, guys, I have a set list.
That's a problem.
I cannot deviate.
Yeah. He's like, I only got one song. Yeah. Anyway, so that was fun. Okay. Next,
we're really doing
next
all
part of these
parts.
six-part questions.
This person's like a lawyer. I mean,
they're mostly, if you and I didn't talk so much, we would make it through these pretty
These
quickly.
are one-word answers.
You know. Salty or sweet? This is tough because you know how much I love sugar. And this is really hard for me because usually what I do
you eat
when
salty
I go
and sweet.
Is, you know, this is why I like paydays because paydays are both.
They are. Are you
combined.
Are you the kind of person who sticks your French fries into your Wendy's Frosty?
I don't do that.
Because I think that's delicious.
That's a little strange, but I think I actually like salty better as much as I like sugar. I think I would go with salty. I think. But what I really like is sugar that's salty. Like that's the best. Like salted caramel or like anything like that is just so good. Any chocolate with salt on it is always with sea salt. Oh, it's amazing. So I'm torn by it because I want both. Okay. Does pineapple belong on pizza? Now,
we all know what you have to say.
I am already on record saying yes.
My answer is
if you want it.
No for me, but can I say I learned how to cut a pineapple this Christmas break. I'm very proud of myself. I didn't know how to cut one. So now I'm really into pineapples and I'm going to put them on everything. So I'm not going to eat the pizza with it, but I'm really excited to cut the pineapple.
Well, the thing about pizza and pineapple is it's kind of like the salty sweet thing. Like you're putting something sweet on a savory thing.
No. But pineapple has like it's so sweet, it has a tartness to it. So it's different. It's not even just salty and sweet.
Oh, it's like, absolutely different. I mean, I love pineapple. It's great. Well, I can't wait to come to your house and try your new pineapple slicing
I will
skills.
cut you pineapple, and if you put it on the pizza, I will not kick you out, but I will not eat it.
That's fine. You're missing out. Is candy corn delicious or trash? Yeah, I think, you know, when I was a kid, I would eat candy corn, but now I'm definitely on the side of trash, I think. You know, and I hate to say that because I hate to be negative about anything. You know, if you like
eat your candy corn if you want. Here's the thing. I've never liked the taste.
It's pretty trashy.
And it tastes like just dissolving sugar in my mouth, which I love sugar. I think we all established that. But it's like, you didn't try. You know, like you're supposed to make me feel like I ate a candy, but like, I think you just pressed sugar together and put some dyes on it. And I want you to try it a little bit harder.
You know, there was, I don't know what it was about old candy. There's a lot of older candies that are very waxy.
Because we didn't,
you know, we
didn't
like
have the
wax.
technology to make the gelatinous Sour Patch Kids.
I remember, you know, I have a little bit of a soft place for both candy corn and circus peanuts. I don't know if you've ever had circus peanuts, the big orange candy peanuts.
Because I like boiled peanuts, which is totally different.
My great-grandfather, yes, my great-grandfather, who lived across the street from me, when we would go over to his house, he always had circus peanuts, and candy corn.
Did he eat them, or was that his treat for you guys?
No, that was like his treat.
Well, that's really sweet. You know, look, if your great-grandfather or mine, if I had one that I met, offered me candy corn, heck yeah, I'd take it. Absolutely. But it would not be my candy of choice.
Yeah. All right, we're almost done. Okay. Disney princess, prince, villain, or superhero. Who would you be and why?
I love that. I mean, growing up, I wanted to be Snow White. You want to know why, though? Because to me, as a child, she was the one who looked most Asian to me because she had black hair. Because back in the day, y'all, we didn't have Asian princesses. Literally didn't. And Jasmine was later on. So Snow White, I dressed up as Snow White for like I think, like literally my entire elementary school years because I was like, she's Asian, y'all. She has black hair. I did not know she was not Asian.
I would say when I was growing up, my favorite Disney movie was The Little Mermaid. But I don't know that I wanted to be The Little Mermaid. Now, though, Moana.
Oh, Moana's
Moana.
awesome.
I would totally be Moana.
Yeah, the new one.
Awesome.
It's not fair. You have
She's
to like go
awesome.
back to when
Everything
we were
about her.
children because there are so many now, and they're really great. But there are so many.
There are so many. It's true. Yeah. If I had to be a villain, I think. I mean, Ursula's got
I'm gonna find
style.
a picture of
She's got
little
style.
Alice as I will. If I find this, I will post it because it's pretty cute. I wore the same costume, which meant the Snow White costume got shorter and shorter as I got older.
Yeah. Okay. I do like the pure evil of Maleficent, like pre-retcon Maleficent, back when she was just evil incarnate. She was pretty cool. Okay, this is the last one from Chaos Coordinator. And this one, you'll love this one. Go to coffee order.
Okay, so because does anyone read the blog Mr. Money Mustache? Money Mustache is his name. He's like all about being frugal and retiring young, and he makes you feel bad about buying coffee. And so because of that, my frugality takes over, and my go-to order is always just black drip coffee. Not going to pay for anything extra because it's still like $2 these days, $2 or $3, which is not inexpensive. But if money were of no matter and I didn't have Money Mustache in my head telling me that I'm, squandering away my children's inheritance or whatever by ordering coffee, it would probably be like a cappuccino with oat milk. I really like the texture of oat milk.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. My go-to order of coffee is usually McDonald's. I mean, my McDonald's order of coffee is, and I'll tell you why, because I used to go to Starbucks, number one, the line's longer, the coffee's more expensive, and it was cold half the time. It's never cold at McDonald's. It may burn your face off, but it's never cold. So my McDonald's go-to order is large coffee, 2 creams, no sugar. That's my go-to. Now, when I'm splurging, I do love a good latte, but I like it when they make it with heavy cream. Like it, which has a name. There's they told me what it was before, but I never remember. But that you can get a latte with heavy cream. I like that.
And
very, very good.
I got like a little I had my girlfriends. I like this. You should adopt this for. I don't know if you have girlfriends, Brett, but all of you listening, my group of girlfriends, we live all over the country, and we do this thing where each Christmas we do like our favorite things present, but it's like very inexpensive. Usually it's like $20 or $15 or less, and we send it to each other because moms never really get presents, right? They're always buying presents for other people. And so we send our own favorite things to each other. And one year I got like your own little frother, and it's like just a little electric frother, but it totally ups the game of your homemade brewed coffee. So it's like a $5 tool, but makes it feel like a special little treat.
Well, there you go, Alice. That sounds delightful. Okay, well, that's all the questions for tonight. Do just a couple things. Remember, if you want to recommend a case or a topic, aliens, whatever it is, email us, prosecutorspod@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out to us on social media as well, @prosecutorspod for basically all our social media. But if you send it to us in a DM or something like that, it's probably going to get lost. So send it to me in an email if you want the case. Second thing, CrimeCon Nashville.
Coming up.
It is now 2024, which means CrimeCon will be here before you know it. And if you don't have your CrimeCon tickets yet, we have a code prosecutors, 10% off. You need to sign up. We're going to have a ton of fun. It's going to be amazing. Lillian has already planned the party. She's got so many different things that we're going to be doing. So if you come, you're going to have a great time. We're going to hang out. We're going to talk about true crime and everything else. So join us in Nashville.
Indeed.
Okay, Alice, anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, I'm so glad we finally recorded an episode when apparently I thought we are on episode 3 already.
And hopefully, yeah. So Alice, we were discussing the case. We're going to do the case, and she thought we'd already recorded 2 episodes. Not entirely sure how that happened, but she was under the impression that we'd already done this.
I was going back and forth talking about the trial transcript. I'm having like total deja vu during this episode. I don't know what's going on. Maybe 2024 with leap year, something just like glitched in my mind.
And hopefully, with Jason's excellent editing, you guys listening on the podcast will not notice all of the issues that we have endured. It took us 2 hours to record this episode. Had to switch out computers, like all sorts of stuff. Like the recording stopped in the middle. It was terrible. But these are the things we do for you guys because we love you. So welcome to 2024. We are so glad to be doing another year of the podcast with you. We got a lot to talk about with Leo Schofield, and we will be back to talk about it next week. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. I can't hear you.
Okay, and you are not freezing. Say some things.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello.
You have not frozen.
That's great.
Okay.
Okay, you ready? You ready for real this time?
If Brittany has to go to the hospital tonight and we have I'm just kidding. I'm not putting this on you.
Well,
I'm totally kidding.
Hopefully we'll get through at least one of these.
Oh my goodness.
She's gonna be fine. Everybody send her good vibes.
I know. No, we counted her breath. She's not in danger zone, so we're good.
At any point you need to go, let me know.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I will.
Okay.
Do you have a word picked? I'm just helping you.
I do have a word.
Yeah. Okay, then I'm ready. I'm excited about this one, so
I am
maybe
too.
I'm amped.
I feel like it's the first time I've recorded anything in forever.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully I haven't lost all the magic.
You haven't lost any magic. You're just as magical in 2024.
Are you looking for a new job or want a career change? Look no further than Monster.com. Need a little help standing out? Our expert resume writing services will make sure you shine. Want to brush up on your interview skills? Engage with our AI interview prep tool. Want some advice on negotiating your new salary? Visit our salary tools and extensive library of career advice articles, and you'll have all the tips and tricks you'll need to succeed. Visit Monster.com today and take the first step towards your career. Monster.com. Find your right job fit.
Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't.
From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. Greenlight.com/Wondery.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.